For more on what is happening throughout the Latin American market, we are joined by BlackRock portfolio manager Will Landers, who oversees $10.5 billion in assets at BlackRock and heads the Latin American fund, which has $1 billion in assets in it. Will, thank you so much for joining me again. Great to have you with us. And, you know, Sam Zell and others have expressed so much interest in what is going on in Latin America and Brazil, but it itself has not been immune to what's been going on in Europe. How is that? Why are the emerging markets getting hit so much?
Look, I think what we've learned over the last couple of years is that in periods of high stress, there's really no safe haven in the equity market. Correlations tend to be very high, and investors are still treating emerging markets as a high beta market, as the high risk area, and tend to sell it out when hit risk comes up.
Yeah.
But as Mr. Zell has said, I mean, the fundamentals for these companies, for these economies, especially for Brazil, are terrific. The valuations have come down significantly because this market really hasn't done much for the last 12 to 18 months, while earnings growth has continued to be very positive. So we find the stock market to be very attractive in Brazil, as well as in Latin America overall, but especially in Brazil.
But have you been surprised, Will, that in fact some of the stocks and the markets in Latin America have been hit harder? I mean, that they've actually underperformed some of the developed markets where there is the crisis brewing?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the banking stocks, especially in the Brazilian market, they've underperformed most emerging markets. They've been performing in line with international banks, while they really don't have any exposure to any of the issues that we're talking about in Europe.
Yeah.
They're well-capitalized institutions with strong management teams, with a growing business, and with growth in their loan books. I mean, and they're trading around 7-8 times earnings. So it's been painful for us because we are overweight these stocks, but we continue to find them very attractive. And in days like yesterday, we take the chance to add a little bit here and there.
Where did you add?
Well, two Brazilian banks, so Itaú and Bradesco are our two biggest positions.
Okay.
And I think right now both of them look very attractive at these levels.
Will, how else are you protecting your portfolio right now? I mean, I know you're heavily weighted in some of the resource plays, but how are you protecting your portfolio?
No, we are actually underweight, Betty, in the resources. We are overweight Vale, but we're underweight the pulp and paper stocks, the steel stocks, the petrochemical stocks. So we are more weighted towards the domestic side of the equation, which should be the first to react or to recover when markets come back, because they are the ones that aren't really being impacted by this whole thing. As we've talked about in the past, Brazil only exports about 10% of its economy. So when you look at Vale is very much tied to the global growth, but it's really tied to Chinese growth, because that's their biggest client. But when we look at the Brazilian consumer, the growth in the middle class, Brazil just came out with employment figures yesterday. They weren't very strong, but they were still very positive, adding about 135,000 jobs on average for the last 3 months. So this expansion of Brazil's middle class continues. Wage growth continues to be positive. So I really don't see any issue with the consumer in these areas.
Okay.
But these stocks sure have been trading like there's a problem.
And Will, quickly, are there any new markets you're entering?
We have been returning a little bit to Peru. We talked about that being one of our overweights before Mr. Mala was elected president. So far, his policies have proven to be okay, so we have added a little bit to that, but it's still very small compared to our position in Brazil.
Will, thank you. I always appreciate you having you on the show. Will Landers, BlackRock portfolio manager, as I mentioned, overseeing $10.5 billion in assets there.